Okay, I hit record and I'm with Dennis Kurlass. Dennis, I don't know how to introduce you because I've been doing this for so long. We actually just talked for like 30 minutes and caught up. So Dennis, tell us where you are in your writing journey. That's a good way to start.
Okay. Well, I've been working with you for, God, it's been 7-8 months now, maybe longer.
Yeah.
I don't know how long it's been.
Almost a year. We've been working together for almost a year.
Time goes fast.
Yeah.
Time goes fast.
Yeah.
So in the book, there's one main section of the book, and we're kind of one main part of it when we're kind of wrapping that up. I think we've got a couple more chapters left. And then we have another story to tell. We're going to lay on top of it.
Yeah.
Because the book is the story is told in some 2 or 3 different layers of time. So that's kind of where I am right now. And I'm kind of excited about the kind of coming to the close of the main section.
I've been meaning to ask you how that feels because you've been working on this book for years.
For years, yeah.
You've been working it with me for a year, but before me, you were working on it for years. How does it feel to like be coming to a close of the main body of it?
Well, it's God, there's a lot of mixed feelings about that. Part of me says, I want to get this thing done, and part of me says, hey, I love the journey. This whole process has been more of the journey and not the end.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty behind it.
Yeah.
But we've got a while to go though. We've got a while.
You're not wrapping this week. Yeah. I do have a coaching client, Robert will probably listen to this, but I do have a coaching client that is like wrapping this week. And it's like, do we keep meeting? What happens next? Because he and I've been meeting for like 8 months too. And we're finishing his book. It's like, oh, I guess we're done. But we're not. He's still
I know that, but that's okay with me because I love doing it. I love working with you.
Thanks, man. Yeah. This is hanging out with you is one of the highlights of my week. So,
likewise, man. Likewise.
Okay, let's talk about the piece. So you sent me, this is the second I should probably tell the podcast listeners this is the interesting. The fun thing about coaching is that sometimes we'll look at the same scene multiple times. So you and I talked through this outline, and then because you were like, hey, help me think through this, like how this scene is going to go. So we talked through it, and then you wrote a copy, and I gave you notes. I was like, hey, you're kind of missing these beats. Like we need this stuff here. And so this is your second pass at it. And I would say this is kind of my first true edit of it, where I was actually like line editing the thing.
Right.
So
right. I think the first time was mostly the dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
The dialogue.
Yeah, you just had a dialogue draft of it,
right,
which was
exactly.
good. Yeah, which was interesting. So let's and we're toward the end of your book here, where your character who has been obsessing over this woman, he's definitely a protagonist, but he's more of I don't even know if I'd call him a hero. I was gonna say he's an anti-hero, but he's not really. He's more of just a confused, mixed up pup. And he's been obsessing over this woman. And we've had the final rejection. He's like moving into his kind of dark night of the soul climax moment. Yeah. So you start off with him like sitting in his apartment. You've got this kickoff where like back in the apartment while preparing for his trip back to the States, Leonidas had one thing on his mind. 3 weeks had passed without hearing a word from Margot. He tried calling her many times, but she never answered. He stood across the street from her apartment and waited, but she never came in. I love the escalation of this, by the way. It's really creepy. He went into the excavation at the side of Agora and looked through the barrier fence, but she never showed up. You just get this like sad music of like him like sitting on a fence. We need a wrap up line to this because this is a summary.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell you to rip the summaries up, but this is actually a good summary because we don't want a chapter of like, we do not want a scene of Leo standing across the street from her apartment and yelling. We don't want a scene of him like standing at the excavation site. Like these are scenes that we need to indicate like he's been doing this crap, but nobody, the reader and the writer, neither of us actually want to see that.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah,
Got it.
so this is a positive summary to put in here because it kind of, but we need to wrap it up. Like, and so he's been doing this thing, like, what's his plan? You just need one more sentence here that's like, finally having given up, he's packing his apartment and ready to go. This conversation here I loved, and I did edit a lot because I was having fun with it. But there's a guy that comes to the door with a telegram. And he's gonna you do the classic kind of common scene of like the guy's standing there waiting for a tip while Leo is obsessing over whether or not the telegram is from Margot,
Right.
which is absurd. Why would you send him a telegram? But I really loved, you open it up with a really nice emotional note where it's like, are you the Leonidas? I'm not going to try to say his last name because I'll butcher it. Leonidas K, that's the short man wearing a cap, holding the mailbag over his shoulder. And then you had, yes, I am. I had, that's me. I don't know why I changed that. I'm just playing around. Answered Leonidas with a frown. He looked past the man, still hoping that Margot had come. So it's really a nice note. And it just kind of like, you can just visualize him like trying to look past the guy, like maybe, okay.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. But then I was wondering, it felt like we need, do they need to negotiate whether they're talking in Greek or English? Do we care about that here?
Well, we addressed that earlier.
Did we? I forgot if we addressed it.
It was a scene earlier that, when I was writing this, I was thinking the same thing. As a matter of fact, I hit in there a couple of times. He said in Greek or something, then I took it out.
Okay.
So I'm not really sure.
Okay. I think we just leave it. I don't think it's necessarily important. It is weird. It's weird when you're writing a bilingual book like this as to like who would just, would they see him and know like, oh, this is an American, I should speak English to this guy.
And he is Greek American, so he looks Greek.
He does look Greek. Yeah. And he has a very Greek, like the guy delivering the telegram has a very Greek name.
Right.
But I don't think it matters. At this point, it doesn't serve any purpose. It's kind of a distraction. So we can just let them talk. So I added some here just to push the daydream. Mostly what I'm doing with these ads is I'm pushing Leo a little bit farther.
Right.
Just to, the conversation's fun, but we have to walk a fine line here between the conversation being fun and not losing Leo's melancholic, because you need it for later. You need it for your next scene. So we need him to stay. So we can't make it all fun and games. We got to push it a little bit. So I just added this phrase, a long letter with an apology of a confession. She'd been, because you had a telegram. Why would she write a telegram? Would it be a letter? And then I just like pushed it a little bit. Like
not quite. That's right. It's not quite enough. That's right.
And so just like make him like dream about what it is, especially since we're going to get into this place where he's like not paying attention to the world. So I want to build up here by adding a couple sentences to like build to like, oh, he's in his head. He's not. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So the question kind of came out of nowhere here. He says, that works, the man said, comparing the name on the card with the name on the telegram. He reached into his bag for an envelope and handed it to Leonidas. And then he had this question like, are you moving? So I'm just adding that dialogue tag up front. It's like nodding past Leonidas. He asks, are you moving?
Good.
He's, well, the boxes in the suitcase. So yeah, those, Leonidas said, back home. We got into this really nice, like quick back and forth, but because Leonidas is in his head, I want to slow it down and get into that daydreaming. So he's like, where are you headed? Back home. So I just added this paragraph that's like, what if the letter was something terrible from her? What if it was her telling him she never wanted to speak to him again? I don't know that you'd want to keep my exact words here, but just like, this is where I would drop that.
Yeah. He's thinking different. Yeah.
And usually I tell you like, hey, stack those utterances to like build that energy to create those exchanges. We actually want to pull the energy out of this one. Like we want to slow this one down because Leo's in this like contemplative, weird, melancholic, like I'm wandering around my apartment alone. So to get the reader to feel that, we want to add these inner thought paragraphs to slow those exchanges down to just make it feel a little more plotting.
Right. Yeah, because he's getting ready to leave, you know.
Yeah, he's getting ready.
He's thinking about all the last 2 or 3 months, and
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm dropping that in there.
Good.
He's like, where is home? Ask the man to adjust his cap, the states, and then I'm going to put another line in here, like Leo examined the front of the envelope. There's no indication who it was from. So just getting him to like so focused on the envelope, he's kind of forgotten about this conversation he's having. This man, right? Where are the states? The man asked, still waiting inside the door, which at this point is where I was like, this is getting funny. And he's like, Chicago, you know, I said, staring at the envelope. He held it up to the light to see if he could see through it. I took this, you had him doing this lower, and I put it up here because we need him like so focused on that album. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Looking up the man. So finally, Leo realizes you have this like Chicago's nice. I added this last line for him. Chicago, I hear it's nice. And then we have this Leo looked up and stalled the man still waiting. Oh yeah, sorry, here you go. He reached into his pocket some drachmas. The man's like, thank you, have a safe trip to Chicago. He leaves. And then I wanted a little bit of a transition here. You had Leo saying, I try, I'll close the door. He turned the envelope over several times. So I wanted to make sure that we know, like, okay, he's back in his apartment.
Yeah.
Stepping back into his apartment, he turned the envelope over several times. And then again, I'm just adding, I wanted more, you have an emotional transition where he finally decides, like, this is ridiculous. I'm just going to open it.
Right.
So he examined the feel. He felt the weight. None of these things had a good indication of what's inside. Cool. And then he opens it. So then that kind of ends our segment here where he's opening up the letter. But I think it feels good. Oh, there's one note I forgot to add. When I added this stuff up here about like, what if the letter was something terrible? I made sure it was bad because I realized as I was reading through this that like, there's not a reason he's not just like ripping into it. If he thinks it's her apology letter, he's just gonna like tear into it.
Yeah.
We need him like concerned about like, what if this is actually something terrible?
Yeah.
So how do you feel about this opening scene now? Like, do you like it? What do you think about it?
Okay. I think the internal thoughts while he's looking at this letter are very important, and I appreciate what you did.
Yeah.
What you're suggesting here, because it does make a lot of sense, because he's in a time of flux here. You know, he wants to go, he doesn't want to go, and he still has hope. So it's not him like giving up quite yet. So this is good.
Yeah. Part of what I like about your work, man, and what I enjoy working with you about is that you're very emotionally connected to the characters. So you're able to take like little small scenes like this and actually make them something that's that has an emotional impact. So I really appreciate that.
And then what your suggestions even so much better is that I can see it. I can see it playing out.
Yeah, like I'm just taking what you've done and like just expanding
film.
it. Yeah, just blowing it up a little bit.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, so this I really like. You jump into the telegraph here, the telegram. It's just a bunch of beeps. You jump into the telegram here. It's from his uncle. And I think it's good. We talked about it last time. We don't need to talk about it again, but it's a nice telegram. Nice and short. Reminding us that he actually has an Uncle George that he's been ignoring the whole book. It's a good thing. This is just me playing with language. There's nothing there really to talk about. Okay, so here again, we need to work on his motivations a little bit. He gets the telegram and he's like, oh, I have a cousin, and I'm trying to remember him, but I can't remember him. And then he has this realization. The one thing he remembered, as if it were only yesterday, were the stories his mother had told him about his cousin, that he was strong and fearless and a hero for joining the resistance. to save the Greek invaders. This isn't the first time you're bringing up the cousin. So it's, again, like this is more of a recall than a summary. He realized that at that moment, what little he knew were myths and stories or simple imaginations. As he followed the telegram, he realized the cousin of his news death had no effect on him. And then you jumped into like going back to Margot.
Yeah.
But what hurt him more was that he didn't know where Margot was, that there's a letter that believed Bruce without him. Since the funeral would be on Sunday, he would have enough time to attend the funeral and return to Pierce back to the ship. But we haven't given him a reason to go to the funeral. He's like, he opens up the letter. He's like, I don't actually know this guy. This is just a myth in my mind. He's like, and I don't actually care. I miss Margot. I'll go to the funeral on Sunday. So we just need a couple lines in here.
Yeah.
Where he's like, you need another paragraph where he's asking himself, like, shouldn't I care? This was my family. What's wrong with me? Obsessing over it when my own blood died. So we need that transition where he actually says to himself, like,
right,
I should be there. I'm going to the funeral. Just to give him that like reason to go. Does that make sense?
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Good point.
Yeah, because I read it the first time and I was like, wait, I like where it was leading was like he crumpled up the telegram and threw it in the trash. Right? That's where it's like, I don't care about this uncle, I don't know. Yeah. So just dropping that paragraph in here, I think smooths it out.
Cool.
So he gets on this bus to go across Greece. This is a tough chapter to write, by the way, because he has these two conversations in it, but there's a lot of like, melancholic Leo wandering around in his head. You do a really good job with it, but it is that like, man, this is not a fast-paced chapter because he's so depressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is I liked this paragraph, but I want to take it a little bit more. After the bus pulled away from the station, after everyone quieted down and settled in, he reached into his bag and took out a photograph of him that he and his mother had taken years ago. They stood at the village well. The top of his head came up to her waist. She wore a long skirt and a woolen sweater, her arm resting across his shoulders. So great. Like I can see that picture. It's very, you do a good job here without having to say it out loud. You do a good job here of like, oh, this is one of those pictures that like recalls you to childhood and gives you those like motherly feelings. Like it's really nice. Her gaze was not on the camera, but past the camera to someplace or someone unknown. I want one more because then he puts the photograph down and his index finger across the image of his mother's face. She had slid the photo into his luggage the day before he left for America.
Yeah.
One line in here about like what's happening to him internally. As like, does his gut wrench, with like the remembrance of his mother? Does he feel choked up thinking about his mother who died? Like, how does he? What's happening with him as he's looking at this photo? Like, just one more line.
Good.
Does that make sense?
Yep, sure does. It's the same. It's the same issue that I had before. I just go in it too abruptly. I think there needs to be a little bit more.
Yeah, well, your prose is artful. Like your next sentence, the road the bus took followed the coastline past factories and shipyards that then climbed high above the sea with a panoramic view of the Saronic Gulf. You write these great lines that just are very picturesque. She wore a long woolen skirt, her arm rested across his shoulders. Like these very nice, like picturesque lines that just paint the picture. I feel like you get lost in writing them and you forget to connect it to the character himself.
You're right. You're exactly right.
What we care about is how the character feels about that great. Like you're putting us in the image, and then we need to know how the character is absorbing it.
Good.
Right. Like so.
Same thing in the next one.
The same thing. And so you had another paragraph here where he's thinking about his mother, and then you have this paragraph where this sentence about what the bus is doing.
Boy, I think I put it in twice, and
no, you didn't. I cut it and I copied it up here.
There you go.
Yeah. So I want to move this sentence up here to break up these two reflections, because again, like we're building to that dark night of the soul for him. So it's a weird chapter that like I keep wanting to slow it down. I want it to feel plodding. So
Cool.
taking this sentence and putting it up here, like the road the bus took followed the coastline past the factories and shipyards and climbed high above the sea with panoramic views of the Saronic Gulf. How does that, what is happening internally with him when he sees that view? And then if you can give me that, I think transitioning to the, it happened fast. His uncle told him 2 weeks after they found the cancer, right? Like, does that make sense? So then we can get this like reflection on the death of his mother.
And then have the character reflect on that.
Yeah, and then have the character reflect on that. So all in all, we should have like 3 internal moves here. Think about where you want him going, right? Like, because then he's going to get interrupted by this guy that wants to talk to him. And I was joking about like when I was reading it, I was like, this chapter should be called like Strange Greek Man Talk to Leo, who doesn't want to speak to. But so think about like how you want him feeling when that guy sits down and build to that feeling, right? Like, so we've got this, like him looking at the photo, that should make his like heart stir. And then we've got him like looking out the window, and that should like, you know, maybe start to choke him up a little bit. And then if we get down here thinking about his mother's funeral, and we actually want like a, you know, maybe a tear escaping his eye or something.
Right. You know, Jeff, going over this, it makes me think about how slow a learner I am. Only because we have a similar scene before a few chapters ago where this character Leonidas is following his anti-hero around the city, and he's by himself, but it's a back and forth thing. And I lost it here. I lost that back and forth, him reacting and him thinking about what he's seeing. It's the same kind of thing, you know.
It's the same thing. Yeah, we talked about how like when you get a character alone like this,
right,
and he's like seeing something, he's actually in the conversation with the world around him.
Right.
And yeah, that's very true. And it's that, I mean, that's funny. I had forgotten about that chapter. Yeah. So, and that is what's happening here, right? Like he's on the bus. Cool. He's in conversation with this photo. So we need his like give and take with the photo.
Right. And he sees the sights, he sees a scene, he needs to react to it.
With the scene, he sees that he thinks about his mom, he needs the reaction with his mom.
Right.
Then we have a summary here. He remembered crossing the bridge of the canal when she assisted the man and the monkeys long ago. I don't know that so here, just to go back to what we're saying, he remembers something that happened at the first of the book. I don't know that I need that kind of reaction here, though, because the memory itself is the reaction.
Right.
That makes sense. Like he's forcing himself to remember this thing that happened with Margot. I think that's good enough. He stayed in his seat and waited for this. Is just like an action move of like, hey, here's what's coming. You don't need anything deep there. Just as the driver, a stocky man with broad shoulders and suit and hat. And he walked up and sat next to Leonidas. And so now we're into the second conversation.
Right.
Is this seat taken? So this is kind of like you were saying, these first paragraphs here are their own segment where he's like on the bus having this reflective moment. Think of that as like a conversational segment. And then these are your transition paragraphs to the next segment where you're giving me some prose. And now we're into this conversation with this guy who doesn't want to talk to. So, you know, that was close. I almost didn't make it, the man said. I want here, as we come through, and I think you and I've talked about this before, when you run a dialogue only first draft, where you're only doing like the dialogue and not, a lot of times the conversation becomes too sparse. So we got to like add a bunch of body language and stuff. So that's what I'm in this conversation. I just want a little bit more body language to carry the emotional weight of what's going on. So like, for example, here you've got like, that was close. I almost didn't make it, said the man. He took a handkerchief out of his shirt pocket and wiped the sweat off of his forehead. I can't believe this heat so early in the season. And yeah, like, it gets like this, especially in the Peloponnese. I wanted like turning away from the guy. Like, I don't want to talk to him. I just look back out the window.
When I read that, I automatically saw it. I mean, I
Good.
saw him turning his head and saying, oh no,
Good. Well, when you
Yeah.
do your next pass with this, don't take what I wrote, right?
Right.
Like, do your next pass and visualize it yourself, because
Yeah. Exactly.
like you've internalized Leonidas way more than I do. You're gonna know the body language.
What he's going to do,
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. I dropped a sign here. It's like tough name to live up to, Dimitri said. He took his hat off and put it on his knee. And then you had, because of the Spartan King. So I just wanted to like slow it down and like make this guy really force himself into the conversation.
Good.
So drawing that like Leonidas side, because of the Spartan King. Like, yeah, I got that a lot as a child. Like, it's just this kind of forced thing. Yeah, I think this is just all me playing with language. There's nothing here. This is that two-person conversation where dialogue tags. So like here you had, so what brings you back? My cousin's funeral, said Leonidas. Oh, I'm sorry. These dialogue tags, we only need them strategically, right? Like, so if you're going to use them, like add some body language in there that brings that emotional weight to it. But we don't need just the simple set.
Right.
Unless you're using it in the middle of a sentence to intentionally slow something down.
Mm-hmm.
So like, if this line was like, my cousin's funeral, but there's no need to be sad. I never really knew him that much. Then I might have my cousin's funeral, Leonidas said.
Yeah.
But there's no need to be sad. I never really knew him that much. And that way I'm using the Leonidas said to like separate the two thoughts. But yeah, so that would be good. But again, that's like a strategic use of that instead of a throwing it in there like you would in a three-person conversation. This is interesting. I wanted to add a question here. You have this moment where Leo starts to open up. And the reason I want to stop here is because I changed it, but part of this has to do with where you want Leo going in the scene. So he's like, your village, how long has it been since you were there? And he's like, oh, a long time, 20 years, I guess. It was then that Leonidas wished the man had never taken a seat next to him. He wondered how one man could ask so many questions. And then you had Leo adding, like, I've been in Greece for 3 months, but there's been no reason to go back. He continued rubbing the back of his neck. I read this line and I was like, well, he's not going to give him more information. So I gave the dude another question. Why so long? And then because one, I thought it was funny.
Yeah, good.
And he was like, he couldn't believe he asked so many questions. He's like, here's another question. But at the same time, that keeps Leonidas in this closed off place. If you want Leo to keep opening up, like to start opening up slowly, like to pull him, if you want to pull him out of the melancholy by the end of this chapter, then this is a good rhetorical move. Giving him longer utterances so that he's sharing more information. And I don't know that there's a right or wrong. It just kind of depends on how you want it to go.
Right.
Yeah.
Good.
Does that make sense?
Yep, sure does. I've been thinking about that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, there's always a reason to go back home. Leonidas pursed his lips. Would you mind if I open the window? Now, if you want him opening up more, we need him like being more open to talk here. So it's not drew his brow together and pursed his lips. It's like an affirming nod, like Leonidas nodded.
Yeah.
And then saying like, would you mind if I open the window? Like, and the guy being like, good idea. That'll definitely help with this heat. Dimitri said as he took a deep breath, as if it hurt to talk. Leo and I reached up and opened the window, feeling the wind across his face. Flash of Sparta. They rode and glows before Dimitri broke in. So 3 months. And I liked that they're like riding in silence and he's like enjoying the drive, and then Dimitri runs it. It's a nice, So again, here though, if we want him opening up, we want him probably to start, we want to start adding that body language that communicates that he's actually starting to engage, right? Like, so I was too busy chasing a woman around, Leonidas said, biting the inside of his cheek. What happened? I might put, if you want him opening up, I might put like a line, an inner thought here that was like, what did happen?
Yeah.
Do I tell him that I've been chasing her around Greece, looking for her in all the spots while she hides from me? But but some kind of reflection here that's like, that's a great question. What did happen? those things happen for a reason. I suppose Leonidas said, feeling as though he was in a therapy session. Do you still have a family in Gurkey? Only an uncle. So if you want him opening up, I might give another beat here on the women.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you decide? I know there's a following question here about his uncle. How much of this conversation are he and his uncle going to have too? How much are they going to talk about Margot?
About Margot?
Yeah.
Only to cement their relationship.
Okay. So you have, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's good.
Yeah. So you have space here in this conversation to have him kind of reflect more on Margot and what's happening. Yeah. So I'd give a couple more beats here before you get to like, do you still have family in Gurkey? I have to be like, I suppose, Leonidas said, and then I might change this feeling as though he was in a therapy session to like, you know, I suppose Leonidas said, feeling like this may be the therapy session that he needed.
Right. Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
And then give him like another statement there, like those things happen for a reason. I suppose, and then like be honest and be like, you know, I came back to Greece to pursue her. And the truth is, you know, it was better to love and lost than never to have loved at all. Right. Yeah. Like he can say some kind of like, I mean, you're great with the like Greek idioms. So maybe something that like actually comes from a story, you know, and then have the guy reflect on that, like, you know, and then have Leo give one more sentence about Margot, about how like, you know, I'm sorry how it turned out, but I'm not sorry that I did it. Like having like this confession.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Good point. Good point.
In true self-justification of a stalker mode. Be like,
cool.
No, it was right that I stalked her. So yeah. And then I would kill this line. So I'm what I did with this note was I'm bringing it back to like, I don't want to talk to this guy. If you want to take it the other way, he needs to be appreciative.
Right.
Yeah. So they go back to talking to the uncle. Leonidas said with a downturned mouth, he turned back to his window and tried to erase the fact that he'd been so obsessed, so much in love, so infatuated, he lost sight of up to now what was most important. So this is a nice, even like when you're going, if you go the positive route, this is a nice reflection here where he's like, man, I wish I could have done all that differently. Right. Like, yeah. Turning back to Dimitri, he saw Dimitri had fallen asleep with the handkerchief still in his hand. His head had slumped forward and his lips were slightly fluttered as though he's dreaming. And then you have this like, the bus arrives and they wake up and they say goodbye to each other. Yeah. And it is just more procedural. It's like, hey, see you later. It was nice talking to you. All that stuff. Unless you have some kind of emotional note here where Leonidas is going to thank him, I would cut this whole section.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we can leave him dreaming and then we don't need to see him again. An hour later, the bus pulled into Sparta. Leonidas walked across the square.
Yeah.
You could, you know, with that slight change in direction of the paragraph, you could have him here thank the guy. Like, thank you for talking to me thank you for talking through all of that. That is a little out of character of Leonidas. He's so self-obsessed. I don't know.
Right. No, he wouldn't do that.
Yeah. But that would justify keeping this.
Yeah.
But I don't think you need it.
Yeah, I read when I was reading over it before you sent it to, after you sent it to me, I saw exactly what you're trying to say here, because we just don't need it.
Yeah, and it is weird because, like, you know, especially when you're writing that like dialogue-centric draft, you feel the need to wrap everything up in dialogue. I do this a lot. I'll have these sections that are like this end of the conversation. It's like, all right, well, will I see you tomorrow? Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, great. So 2 o'clock? Yeah, 2 o'clock. Okay, awesome. I'll see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. And when you're writing the dialogue only first draft, you have to get into like this place of like, I got to end this somehow. But a lot of times I come back and cut those because it's like this procedural goodbye. Like, do I need it? I don't really need it. It's not doing anything emotionally to the scene, so I can just chop it.
Good.
This is all great. You have this like, again, he's here back he's like walking to the hotel. You know, the square looked the same as it did when his father brought him here over 20 years ago. King Leonidas, clutching a bronze shield, awaiting. And you know, I will probably do here. I didn't add it in because I figured we just talk about it, but I'd probably do here what you were doing at the beginning, which is give this nice kind of emotional conversation around what he's seeing. Because you have this really great moment here where he comes to the hotel and he remembers being there with his father. And you have this King Leonidas clutching a shield, the weathered building with lopsided awnings drooping over the sidewalks, the cobblestones running haphazardly from the end of the square. We just talked about his name being Leonidas and what the pressure of that means.
Yeah.
And now you see this king. So if you go the positive way up here, this is a reflection, like you need a reflection here of how he too feels like, you know, a renewed sense of strength.
Yeah,
you know,
he's connected. He's connected to the place. So
yeah, reconnecting to his roots. That'll be a nice setup too when you like completely rip those roots out from under him in the next scene.
Exactly.
Terrible thing to say, but you know,
what we're gonna do.
Yeah, what I can't remember who said it, but some famous author said storytelling is putting your character up a tree and then throwing rocks at them. Yeah,
that's exactly
rocks at Leo. Yeah,
that's what we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, oh, it's so nice in this tree. Ow, ow. Yeah, so yeah.
It can get worse.
That's right. Here it comes. And if you do that, you can actually end it. Like if you have a nice reflection here about how he's feeling strong, that can be your last paragraph. You can end it there. These next three paragraphs are really nice though. So like, you know, it's all just kind of how you want the it's not, but you got back in the room, he sat on the ledge, reached for his photograph, leaned up against the nightstand, he studied it again. He wondered why his father hadn't been in the photo. Perhaps his mother was looking at the second photograph too. Now they were gone, it was too late. It saddened him that he wouldn't ever know. So you don't need to add anything here because you have the emotional reflection already.
Yeah.
Right. The breeze was cool his body. He watched the wooden blades east of the room, and when he heard children playing on the sidewalk beneath the window, he closed his eyes and tried to imagine what life would have been like if his mother was still alive. Again, I don't need anything added here because I've got the here's how it's impacting him with that, like him closing his eyes and trying to imagine. Looking up, he followed the cracks of the void. Looking up, following the cracks in the ceiling, the void returned, smothering him in heavy, thick fog. The night in the courtyard, still lingering the edges of the mind. His plan had failed. What have I done? I've lost her forever, he whispered to himself. So this is a good ending. You have another couple sentences on my read because you know what they are. This is a good ending if you want the whole thing to be heavy and melancholic. Right? Like when I first read it, I was like, yeah, this takes us back to the beginning where he's standing around in the apartment and he's like, what have I done? If you want it to end with him feeling strong, end it with this paragraph up here where he sees the statue of Leonidas.
Yeah.
It feels like a king again.
Yeah.
It just depends, like, and this is that thing of like, you know, this is where I think crafting scenes becomes really fun. We're like, oh, I can steer this emotional journey in multiple ways. Which way do I want to take the reader? Like, you know, you've got choices here.
Right. As
an author.
That's good.
Yeah.
Really good. Cool.
Anything else you want to talk about?
Back when he's talking to the guy on the bus.
Yeah.
And he's telling him about, no, maybe he's thinking about his cousin. I forget what it was. About the Brit, how he
yeah, he's talking about how long has it been? 20 years. I've been in Greece. Good idea. Leonidas reached
when he's describing his cousin.
Yeah.
I did what you suggested. I went back and I took almost the same words.
Nice.
Yeah. Remember you said you go back and read that part where
yeah. That's up here where you did the I'm really glad you did that. It's up where he gets the telegram. Yeah,
somewhere in there. Yeah. Anyway, I just want to mention that. That was a good help. That was good advice you gave me there. Yep.
Nice. Yeah. Cool. So since we're talking to the pod, since we will have people listen to this, this cousin is somebody that you talk about in the early chapters, and then like we're in the later chapters, you don't bring him up. So I told you to cheat and go back to the early chapters and just copy the language. This is it right here. Copy the language from the early chapters.
That's it. That's exactly where it is. Yeah.
To grab that like memory of, oh, I've already read this. This feels familiar.
Yeah.
It's like using the reader's own deja vu to like accelerate what you're doing. Yeah. But
Cool.
it's that he was strong and fearless and a hero for joining the resistance to save the Greeks, to save from Greece the invaders. Yeah, that's a good solid.
Cool.
I love that you did that. That's great. I'm sad that I missed it on Mary. Yeah. What else? Anything else we need to talk about?
I don't think so. I'm just setting up, and this whole thing is setting up for the next scene. And that's why
I'm really pumped about those.
Yeah,
those are going to be good.
I'll get that to you pretty soon.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Yeah. Let's. I'm going to stop the recording and we can talk about the next steps for coaching.
Okay.
Yeah.